G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing John Warrillow, founder of the Value Builders System, and John's based in Toronto, Canada. And today we're going to be discussing increasing the value of a business. So thanks for your time, John.
Pleasure to be here, Michael.
Now, how we know each other, this is the first time we've sort of met, albeit virtually, but I've sort of been following you for many years, probably 10 to 15, and read your first book, The Automatic Customer, which is all about subscription businesses, which was fascinating, and learned a lot from that. And I'm sure our listeners and small business owners will get a lot out of our conversation, because let's face it, increasing the value of their business is so important, right?
Yeah, it's a big part of, I think, the definition of entrepreneurship. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs kind of find themselves feeling they've got more of a job than a company when, you know, clients and customers are after them, and they never feel like they can take a proper vacation or really have a business they can kind of predict how things are going in the future. And so that's what we try to help them do is understand how to build an asset as opposed to a job, like a company that you could ultimately transfer to somebody else.
Yeah, great. And I think that's right. Just not having a job, but actually building a business that you can ultimately transfer, as you say. So tell our audience a bit about yourself and your experience on this topic.
Yeah, look, I've started a couple of businesses myself and exited one to a publicly traded company, New York Stock Exchange listed company in New York. Then I went on to write 3 books about the topic. Actually, Built to Sell was my first book, and then The Automatic Customer was the second. And then since then, I've been running Value Builder. And so Value Builder is a sales and marketing tool used by about 1,000 business coaches around the world. We have 70,000 business owners who have used our system with the help of a coach. So that's really me in a nutshell, and how I come to this topic, both from the position of having been built and sold companies myself, but also sort of studied them in our own research analysis of people who use Value Builder.
Yes, it's obviously a passion of yours. And I guess from a business perspective, did you see sort of a gap insofar as not many businesses that you'd come across have really had the ability or the tools to actually build that value in their business?
Yeah, look, I came by it honestly. I had a company that I built up to being, $5 or $6 million in revenue. It was a market research company where we did project work, and we had 20 to 30% profit margins. It was like a more than a 7-figure profit each year business. It was a very successful business. We had very big clients. Telstra in Australia was a client of ours, BT in the UK, and all kinds of customers in the United States. And I went to sell the company, and I talked to an M&A guy in Toronto, and he said, like, I can't sell your company. There's nothing to sell. And I heard that, and it was devastating to hear that. What he was referring to was the fact that I was still involved in both the research as well as the, holding the hands of some of the clients. And what he said is, as long as you're involved in both the selling and the doing, there's nothing to sell. It's just a glorified job. And that goes back to a conversation I had probably close to 20 years ago now. And it was a really difficult pill to swallow, because again, I thought I'd built something of value, 7 figures in profit, et cetera, great brand name clients. What I didn't really appreciate was a business is only transferable if it's can run without the owner. And I was using the classic business report card, a profit and loss statement as my sort of report card at the end of the year. Whereas what I came to learn is that acquirers, they look at a profit and loss statement for sure, but there are other things that they do to evaluate a business for the purposes of acquisition. And so it kicked off my journey. It kicked off me wanting to write books about it, because I think they say you teach what you want to learn. Isn't that what there's some expression like that? I think that's that's true in my case. I started to write and think about this deeply because I wanted to really understand it. I read, I host a podcast where we interview a different entrepreneur every week and ask them about their exit, in part because I want to learn from other entrepreneurs. So I think, I'm both a student and a teacher, I guess, in that regard.
Yeah, no, it's good to obviously experience that. And it's interesting being a business coach and working with businesses, having that conversation can be somewhat challenging for get them to confront the brutal facts, as Jim Collins would say. So I know coaching businesses, it's a big focus of mine, and getting their head around that. And once they have, I guess they can start that journey to build a business for value. And I always look at it too, building a business where they've got choice ultimately, whether they sell it or continue or run out of management, whatever it looks like. But a healthy, sustainable business.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that we use this thing called the Value Builder Score, because it assesses a business in an objective, unemotional way across 8 dimensions that are important to acquirers. And I think that we do that because, for a lot of businesses, they are emotional. They are very, very close. A lot of business owners feel it. You've heard the old expression that in some cases they feel like they're, as important as a child to them. They're very, very close to their businesses emotionally. And so when an advisor or coach says, "Oh, your business isn't worth what you think it is, or it's not as valuable as you think it is, or these are the 3 things that are broken in your business," it's a very hard thing for business owners to hear. It's like, the mom in the maternity ward, who hears their child is the ugliest. It's really difficult to hear. And so having an objective measuring stick to say, this is not me, it's not my opinion, this is what the software says, can be a helpful guide for a lot of folks.
Yeah, a little bit more objectivity comes into it. And
take the emotion out of it.
Yeah, and typically business owners do overvalue their business, there's no question. You mentioned the 8 dimensions of the value builder, so maybe it's useful just touching on each one of those just in high level, just to give our listeners a bit of a sense of those key components.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, growth potential is one of them. So most business owners want to be viewed on what they've done in the past, and they think of themselves running a marathon and they're like at mile 25 and a half and they're just willing their body across the line. But of course, for an acquirer, they're looking to start their journey owning your company. And so what they want to know is, what's the future? How big could this be? How much could we expand, et cetera? And so again, most owners want to look in the rearview mirror, to use a driving analogy, and say, this is how much revenue we did last year. This is how much profit we had last year. This is how many customers gave us great reviews, et cetera. That's all good. And that can be a predictor of the future. But what acquirers want to know is, what's the future of this business? I've got a buddy who he helps companies deal with radioactive waste in Canada, and Australia being a big mining country, you would know about radioactive waste. It's part of the mining process. And so there are like 3 companies in Canada that have been authorized by the Canadian government to deal with radioactive waste, and his is one of them. And so the good news is he's got incredible barriers to entry in his industry, because it takes years to become, authorized. The problem is that he's already doing business with, 80-90% of companies that would ever need to deal with and dispose of radioactive waste. So it would be difficult for him to show a lot of future growth because he's already got so much wallet share. So that's one big one. Another one that I alluded to there is monopoly control, meaning how differentiated is your marketing positioning in the marketplace? Do you have barriers to entry? The famous American investor Warren Buffett's famous for saying he invests in companies with a deep and wide competitive moat, meaning it would be hard to just enter into that industry and compete with that business. And so again, in the case of my friend's business that deals with radioactive waste, he's got an amazing moat around his business because there are only 3 companies that are authorized to do what he does. And so because of the tenure, length of time it takes to get authorized, he's got a great competitive moat. But for a lot of business owners, they don't really have a moat. Their moat is, well, we offer great customer service, or we're the local guy or gal. Like, we're on Gold Coast and there's only one distributor of this product in Gold Coast. Well, here's the problem. Amazon has changed the game, and like all of the other major e-commerce players have changed the game so that being close to your customers is no longer quite the differentiator it was 50 years ago, when being the guy or gal in town was important. And so you've got to think about, what's the point of differentiation? How do I have a competitive moat around my business? A third of the 8 drivers is recurring revenue. So to what extent do your customers repurchase what you sell on an ongoing basis? Another one's called Switzerland structure, which is inspired by the country of Switzerland, where, they're obsessed with independence, right? Like, they didn't join the 2 world wars because they wanted to be Switzerland. They wanted to be neutral, right? And sort of have it both ways. And so we give the name the Switzerland structure to the business model, where you as a company is not dependent on any one customer, employee, or supplier. In other words, you've got good diversity among your customers, good diversity among your suppliers, and you're not overly dependent on a single employee. And when across those 3 dimensions, if you're independent, you score well in Switzerland structure. So, I mean, I could go on for hours on this stuff, but those are 4 of the 8, and give you a sense of some of the things that we look at.
Yeah, no, that's a good insight. And I think to your point before, often, particularly the smaller business, as they grow, they try to be everything to everybody, and all they are is average at the end of the day. So it's certainly getting to refocus on a particular market and some points of difference, competitive advantage, as you say.
Yeah, it's a big deal, because when acquirers look at a company, they don't want to buy Me Too products and services. When an acquirer, I don't know what's happening in Australia, but here in North America, the streaming companies have really taken over the mainstream television companies. Is this similar in Australia?
Yeah, pretty similar. There's certainly a raft out there, and I know myself, I don't watch much free-to-air television anymore.
Yeah, nor do I. I mean, there was a time where I would subscribe to this cable package, television package, where I get like 500 channels. And I might watch 2 or 3, like the sports channel, maybe the news channel, but that was it. But I was paying for 500, and I felt like I was sort of just kind of ransomed by the cable providers, and nobody likes that feeling. And so along comes Netflix, Disney, ESPN, all these sort of streaming companies saying, hey, for $10 a month or $12 a month or whatever it is, you can have our channel, and it's great. It's commercial free, et cetera. Well, an entire generation of people have moved to streaming services and off of cable. Yet on a per channel basis, if you think about it, when we had 500 channels and we were paying $100 a month for cable, per channel, we were only paying, say, 20 cents a channel. With Disney, we're paying $12 a channel. And so we're, as consumers, willing to pay a massive premium to buy only what we want. Acquirers are just the same way. When they look at a company and you have one product or service line which is differentiated in the marketplace, has recurring revenue, et cetera, but then 58 other Me Too products and services that have no differentiation or commoditized, all they want is the one product or service that they think is differentiated. They don't want to pay for all the other stuff. You as a business owner want to be paid properly for your entire company, but acquirers won't buy your whole business. And so it's this sort of like mirage, or this kind of fool's errand. We think, oh, it's 8 times cheaper and easier to cross-sell an existing customer a new product or service, which is true, by the way. But for every product or service you cross-sell your existing install base, if you're not differentiated offering it, you're diluting the value of your company. You're making it less attractive to an acquirer. And so it's one of those many ways, Michael, where, what makes your company more profitable in the short term also makes it less valuable in the long term. And that's a really tough message for a lot of entrepreneurs to hear, because we've been told that the profit and loss statement is our report card. That's what I learned, or thought I learned in business school, that the P&L was the most important document. But what I've come to learn since then is that there's this other sort of way to think about business, which is about growing the value of a company, not its profit, but its value. And once you start getting dialed into that, I think that's when you start to see the real value of your company go up in lockstep.
Want to become the best manager you can be? Check out our Kick-Ass Manager course at growasmallbusiness.com. Do the course and add your fellow managers for no extra cost. Join the 30%. 70% of people quit their job because of their manager.
Yeah, I guess it's understanding those. I guess that what provides value, and I guess the key drivers, right, to lead to the profit loss, and I call it the scoreboard. So it's sort of what you do that leads to that as the outcome, rather than focusing on that. That's too many small business owners do that, as you alluded to. So yeah, so it's a great point, and like you said before, a conversation we could keep talking all day about, because I'm very passionate about that as well. So have you got a sort of a few sort of stories you can sort of share with our listeners that sort of talk to how you've helped business owners build their business and the value?
Yeah, I mean, I get to do this podcast every week called Built to Sell Radio, where I interview a different entrepreneur. I literally ask them sort of like, what did you do? And how did you build value? One story that pops to mind is a woman named Stephanie Breedlove, who I interviewed a few years ago, who built a payroll company for parents who have a nanny to pay, or an au pair. And she built this company up to, it was about 10,000 customers. They were doing about 9 million in revenue when she looked out in the universe and said, who would want to buy this company? And she realized there's a business called care.com out there. Care.com is like the Angie's List. If you know that company, I'm not sure if they have it in Australia, but it's like you plug in your area code, your postal code, and it will provide you, in Brisbane, in Gold Coast, a list of 5-star rated babysitters, au pairs you could hire. And you're using the wisdom of the crowd to like vet your au pair or whatever. And at the time, care.com had 7 million subscribers, and Stephanie Breedlove had 10,000 customers and $9 million of revenue. Now, if you think about it, all 7 million care.com subscribers, these parents who are looking for a nanny, need to pay the nanny, need to pay the au pair. And as a result, it was the perfect strategic acquisition for care.com. Stephanie Breedlove sold her $9 million business, $9 million top line revenue, sales turnover, for $54 million, 6 times revenue, which is, if you know anything about valuation, I mean, that 6 times profit is a good outcome. 6 times revenue is like astronomical. And the question is like, how did she do it? Well, if you go all the way back to the beginning of her business, it was around year one when she was just $300,000 in revenue. So it was Stephanie and one employee, right? This is a tiny company. And she had a choice to make. She was in the business, she'd set it up to do payroll for parents who had a nanny to pay. And it was becoming more difficult for her to acquire customers because she'd sort of tapped out her friends and family. And so she needed to go find some new customers. And everybody and their brother was saying, well, we'll just cross-sell your existing customers a new service, right? So busy parents who are your customers today need all sorts of things, right? Like they need lawn care, they need, meal delivery services, they need all kinds of things. And so she almost started cross-selling existing products and services, but she decided against it because she went back to like why she started the business, which was to create the world's best payroll company for parents who have a nanny to pay. And so she doubled down. It took her much longer to build her business. It took her, in fact, 25 years to build a $9 million business. This is not Google. It's not Tesla. It's not growing like a weed. It's a very slow growth company, but she just focused on what would drive value, creating her competitive moat. Again, what we call monopoly control, recurring revenue. And 25 years later, she sold it for 6 times revenue, $54 million on a $9 million business. I mean, it's unbelievable what she created. But that's one that pops to mind. We've interviewed a bunch of people in Australia for the show. David Traverne, who built a great digital marketing agency, sold that. Lots of people that I could talk about, but the principles of this are the same. Is to focus again on these 8 key drivers and let time take its effect.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. I think that you said over 25 years. I think is that an important aspect that for business owners to be relatively patient, because I guess the old saying, Rome's not built in a day, and I guess those baby steps, but clear on, I guess, as you say, the business model, competitive advantage, and where the value's at, and just be patient. Is that an important sort of part to the?
Yeah, like a fine wine takes years to mature. I think that's the same thing for a business, where I see business owners, unfortunately, kind of flip-flopping their strategy, chasing revenue as their primary goal. I think, the BRW 100 in Australia is the 100 fastest growing companies in Australia. And I think there's lots of examples. EO Australia, you got to have $1 million turnover to get into EO. We use revenue as entrepreneurs as a measuring stick. Who's the smartest person in the room is the person who has the biggest revenue line. And I think it's a massive disservice. I think there's lots of examples of companies out there that have tons of top line and nothing on the bottom line, or make all the mistakes I'm describing, build their businesses based on themselves. Over time, they build these wonderful businesses and they feel great at the rugby match or whatever. I've got the biggest business. I employ the most people. But when it actually comes to building value, many cases, they're not building much because it's too dependent on them. It's just one or two customers. There's no recurring revenue. There's no margin. There's no gross margin. All these things that we look at. And it's really about ego. Ego is what drives us to want to be the biggest shot in the room, right? And again, as entrepreneurs, we measure that by revenue, by number of employees. It's within 3 seconds of a cocktail party at EO, someone will ask you how many employees you have. Why? Because it allows them to measure how big and important you are relative to them. And I think it's a massive mistake. I think, the most famous acquisition of all time, or one of the most famous, is WhatsApp, acquired by Facebook. I think, I'm going by memory, it was, I think, $26 billion. They had 58 employees. Think about that for a second. $26 billion and they had 58 employees. It doesn't matter how many people you employ, how much revenue you have. What matters is the value you're creating. And so I think, I can't remember how I got on this horse, but I better get off before I go on too long. But look, my point is just that we celebrate revenue too much, and in fact, what I think folks should do is think about value. It's where I think fortunes are made and lost.
And value creates profit, right? So.
Yeah, it does. But again, I would just encourage folks to think about value. Like a lot of companies are measured by a multiple of earnings, right? And so we think, oh yeah, I'm in the plumbing business, right? And so plumbing companies trade at 5 times EBITDA, and that's sort of the way it is, and it's never going to change. And so all I got to do is increase my profit, and then I'm going to improve my valuation. I think the savviest entrepreneurs look more at the multiple than they do at the profitability. Surely the profit is important. And of course you want to grow your profit, both for short-term cash, being able to pull money out of the business, as well as overall the growth of your business. But I think we pay too little attention to the multiple, because I go back to Stephanie Breedlove. A good multiple for a small business, a $9 million business, probably 6 times profit. She got 6 times revenue. It's a completely different game that she was playing. And so I just think it makes sense to focus in on both the multiple as well as the profit it's multiplying.
Yeah, and that's a very good point. And as you say, the multiple is all about the value.
It's all about how you perform in these eight factors that I'm describing.
No, I like it. That's certainly I'm very passionate about that when coaching business owners as well. So can't agree with you more. So we could talk all day. Unfortunately, we haven't got that amount of time. But so just to close, John, what's at least one thing you'd recommend a small business owner does based on your knowledge and experience from here?
Look, I'm sure a lot of your listeners are parents, and I think running a company, the temptation is to think of ourselves as CEOs. And again, our goals are revenue and EBITDA, profitability. That's our measuring stick and our self-worth as business owners, as entrepreneurs. And I actually think evolving the way you think of your role as an owner of a business, and think less as a CEO of your business and more as the parent of your business. I'm not sure, Michael, do you have kids?
Yep.
Yeah. So Yeah. So I've got two boys as well. And I think, you know, I think about my job as a dad. Do I hope they're successful, and do I have aspirations for them? Sure, but the biggest aspiration I have is that they grow up into becoming adults that can be independent, happy adults. And I think if we as parents achieve that, then we've kind of checked the box as parents. And I think the same can be true for our role as entrepreneurs. If we can build our companies to be able to thrive independently without us, we've given birth in the world. We brought life into the world. And that is the ultimate measure of the worth of an entrepreneur is, can your business thrive in the world without you? And if you have, you've genuinely given birth to a business. And I think that's again, for parents, if you haven't got kids, that might not resonate with you, but if you're a parent, I think that headspace could be helpful as you think about, your planning for next year and how you're planning to grow your business. If the first lens is, how do I get this thing to operate and succeed without me? I think that'll serve you well.
Yeah, great little tip to take away. And I think for our listeners to also get on your podcast, I listen to it regularly, and it's a great one, and I guess reinforces all those components you talk about to build value, but also to hear stories of success. It's always good to hear as well. So look, appreciate your time, John. It's been a great conversation. I'm sure our listeners get a lot of value out of it.
Thanks, Michael. It was a pleasure to be with you.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.